Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Program Director for Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University, and I am here with a COM 2143 Digital Media Literacy Asynchronous lecture. We are looking at some weekly discussion questions coming from our readings. Students have provided the questions, and I will facilitate some responses. Unfortunately, time restraints and all of that, and we can't get to every single question, and so we work on prioritizing them based on sort of level of rigor, the association between the citations provided and the possible, responsibility, right? The likelihood that they can generate, those questions can generate not just a response from me, but ongoing responses from you all. So we are excited to tackle those, and we're going to look at some week 2 discussion questions for digital media literacy. And I want to jump right in and start with, looks like Justice. Okay, Justice submitted some questions for week 2, and we will get to those. As always, we are working off of at least a pair of texts, and so this week our questions still, as with week 1, reflect Marcel Danise's popular culture introductory perspectives, as well as Linda Spencer's Writing Well in the 21st Century, the 5 Essentials. Okay, so our students are generating questions from those readings, and as we move further in the course, we'll also be talking about spreadable media. Justice, first up for us, asks, begins with an excerpt from page 43 of Linda Spencer's Writing Well in the 21st Century. We read and write differently on a computer screen than we do on paper. All right, so the response is, I'm not sure I understand this. Obviously, it is quicker and easier to type than it was to take pen or pencil to paper in the past, so timeliness. But why are computer-generated documents less complex, sentences shorter, and rules more relaxed now? Is this not simply producing a future generation that is less literate? Okay, so stimulating thoughts to kick us off here with some week 2 discussion. And I will jump all over the map, probably like people do with computer-mediated communication, but do my best to respond here. Let me start at the end. Is this not simply producing a future generation that is less literate? We are becoming literate in different ways. All right, so traditional grammatical English is in the crosshairs of many. Okay, it has, for all intents and purposes, come under not necessarily attacks, but there are lots of loosened restrictions, and this has less to do with people becoming less literate as much as more people have a voice, and so people that never quite mastered the the art and the craft and the rules of grammar can afford and practice communicating on smartphones and computers, just like the people that have had that access. And so you have now these conversations, these dialogues, these narrow spaces, these these cul-de-sacs in digital spaces, or what have you. All right, everyone has a voice online, and so what you're seeing is perhaps a larger reflection of reality. So used to, in the press, maybe in early years of the internet, aside from chat rooms, you would have a large component of content being created by people with a degree, multiple degrees, a sort of like writing experience, professional training, and now it's just everybody. it's a cultural hodgepodge of digital interaction. And so yeah, we this is not new to human history, and of course literacy as a thing, as a phenomenon, is only at best 1500 years old plus for the mass populace, right? Of course you had scribes of time immemorial, and those that could articulate themselves in written form, but that would not have been the the common practice in early human history, right? So things change, evolve, right? And sometimes we use a word like, well, evolve versus devolve. Things change, and so grammar rules. English is no exception, and one of the things we talk about in a communication major in our courses is how language is constantly in motion, okay? We talk about denotative versus connotative uses, the primary versus secondary meanings of words, of terms, and when we get into the connotative or the secondary meanings, this could include slang, and what is slang but alterations to language, right? Recoded terms that have new uses and new meanings for people. Okay, so but back to a previous question. It's quicker to type than the pencil or paper in the past, but why are computer-generated documents less complex? Or what's going on there? And I would follow up by asking the broad question, rhetorical, for everyone listening. Do you write more in your current job, or do you type more for the employer you work with? Okay, whether you're the employer or the employee, do you handwrite more, or do you type more formal documents? Internally, post-it notes, sticky notes, I got it. We are all jotting things down all the time, but how frequently in formal communication, in public communication, is it becoming the norm for digital exchange, right? Typing documents rather than signing them. Something to consider there. Let's jump to the Danisi text, Popular Culture, from page 62. Paradoxically, it is the act of transgression itself that enhances pop culture's appeal. Spectacles that intentionally cross the line of decency have always been part and parcel of popular culture. So, page 62 there. Follow-up question, how far is too far? And will there ever come a time when society is no longer surprised by the shock factor of pop culture? Waves, cycles, okay, we see the cultural pendulums shift, right, as the colorful language describes there, right? It can pivot toward conservative ideals, conservative practices, and then it can swing hard back the other way to sort of progressive ideals and expressions. And popular culture at times does tend to swing in that progressive manner, but that is often tied to several factors, the cultural reflections of the times, but also an interest in whether it's storytelling or music or sort of entertainment in that broad sense. Entertainment is about kind of tickling the senses of the audience, and think about comedians for a second, right? The comedian's role is to get close to, if not step over, that boundary that that moral majority would operate under, okay? And so they are creating humorous response based on our shared expectations of where we normally end things or cut short conversation or stop ourselves in social observations, especially in groups or public, and they take us beyond that boundary. Okay, and so there's a shock, there's a awe, there's a surprise, and much of our entertainment operates in this way. Okay, this is why so many of these serialized dramas, people are more and more latching to Netflix as this vehicle for storytelling, and many of their narratives are intentionally designed to surprise us, to shock us, right? And because that mechanism also hails us, right, to come back for more, to stay tuned for the next episode, to give up sleep or what have you, to further binge watch that product and then circulate it, right, with your friends or family or coworkers or whoever. On propaganda theory, okay, essentially the theory maintains that those in power, such as the government of the day, influence how the media present news coverage for the simple reason that power brokers control the funding and, in many cases, ownership of the media. Page 44, then easy. A follow-up question: who controls the American media? Let me pause as I go. There's a great deal of compound questions, so I'm putting a lot of thought in here. In week 2, justice is, but who controls the American media? This is something we'll try to get into more and more in the digital political communication course, but in essence, spoiler alert, right? Big tent thinking here on a macro scale. There are about 5 or 6 corporations, okay, that are these controlling ownership groups that essentially fund in varying ways the majority of mainstream media, okay, in the U.S. But social media reimagines this formula. All right, and that's where we're seeing so many tensions on social media now, is that you have these traditional hierarchies of corporations or private owners or what have you, funding mainstream or news media in various ways, some more questionable, some more objective, and we now have these outlets for everyone to say what they're feeling. But because we're not saying it out loud necessarily, some of us are, but because we're typing it out, sometimes we say things differently than we would if we were in front of everyone. In fact, if we subscribe to this idea that the majority of us are anxious about public speaking, then how in the world are we saying the things that we're saying online? So there's an interesting disconnect between how comfortable we feel expressing ideas in digital spaces versus in person. And so that's something to think about and look out for. Does our president have a stronghold on it, or do other political members or government agencies control it, being the media? Not control. And we're going to do a little bit of informed speculation here, right? This is just a discussion, food for thought. But one could surmise that this is exactly why the POTUS, if you will, has such an antagonistic response to mainstream media, right? In that if he's quote unquote waging a war on the media, as some have written, in an effort to discredit it. And the discrediting is because so much of those organizations, writers, individuals' perspectives, do not reflect favorably on maybe the job, but more maybe the person or the character of the individual. Okay, and so it's an instance where, okay, you don't immediately respond favorable to me, then I will do what I can to sort of like crush you in that traditional corporate style. So this is real information theatrics playing out before our eyes. Also, politicians, they don't control media, but they do have their safety spaces, right? Their silos they run to where they can talk and do that sort of thing. We're gonna pause right now and take a quick break, switch loops, and we'll be back with part two of our conversation.